When Maggie was 8 years old, a drunk driver hit their family car while they were on their way home from ice cream, and Maggie, who'd just unclipped her seatbelt to pull on her jacket because the ice cream had made her cold, went flying between the two front seats and hit the dashboard head first. The doctor at the ER said she was made of rubber because she didn't have a scratch on her. But for Maggie, it was the first time she'd ever realized, or at least really believed, that she was breakable. Sometimes she wondered if the accident hadn't happened, would she have turned out differently? A little more reckless like her friends? JC, for instance, seemed to think she could never get hurt and that adulthood would never arrive. But Maggie thought of the future all the time. And for college, life, all the stuff coming her way in that future, she needed money and a job. Gill Creek, she noticed on her first trip into town that Monday on the job hunt, was a white town. White houses, white boats, white curbs, white outfits. It seemed to glow and reflect off the rippling, sparkling blue of Lake Michigan, dotted only with the changing colors of the leaves that lined the crisscross streets. Late-season tourists meandered up and down Main Street, strolling into poky old-fashioned candy shops, pastel-washed clothing stores, fish boil restaurants, a local specialty her mom had threatened that they'd try, and cafes. Shops had started putting pumpkins by their doorways and hanging stalks of colored corn on their doors. It took about an hour for Maggie to size up the town, to measure its width and length and breadth against where she'd come from, and to know life was going to feel small here. Fudgies. That was what Elsa, the woman who stood before her, called them. But Maggie had to ask her to repeat herself. Oh, that's a word for the tourists. For some reason, when people are on vacation, they love to buy fudge. You would not believe how much fudge Fudgies will eat any given summer. A long day of walking had landed Maggie here. She'd filled out 3 applications, at 2 restaurants and 1 kite store. But it was pretty clear that the part-time jobs were drying up now that summer was ending. The clerks had taken her applications as if she were just another of the day's hassles. She'd meandered all the way to the uglier end of Main Street, beyond the reach of the tourists' natural habitat, and arrived at a giant yellow Help Wanted sign leaned against the side of a low, squat brick building. Only when she'd walked through the front door had she realized it was a sprawling antiques mall. Inside, it smelled like dust and mothballs and stale cigarette smoke and old coffee. It was like something out of Charles Dickens, full of nooks and crannies and narrow walkways and pieces of furniture piled crookedly. A sign by the register announced that Elsa's Lost World Emporium did not take checks without proper ID. Maggie was just turning around to leave when Elsa approached her and introduced herself. She was plump, moist-faced, probably in her late 40s. She had shoulder-length, curly, dirty blonde hair. She wore bright orange-red lipstick and a sweep of sparkly brown eyeshadow with thick mascara. "You hear about the sign?" she asked. "You don't look like an antiques hound." Maggie nodded uncertainly. "What kind of grades do you get?" Elsa asked, looking her over distractedly and wiping the moistness from her forehead with one long gray sleeve. "A's," Maggie responded. "I'm homeschooled by my dad now," she added, then speedily threw in, "but I'm self-disciplined." Was she actually trying to get this job? "Have you had a job before?" Elsa fingered the golden crucifix around her neck. Maggie nodded and shifted from foot to foot. "Well, this one's pretty simple. Just ringing up customers, keeping inventory, keeping up with the vendors, and communicating about their stalls. But I need to know you're reliable."